Hello there, I'm Janice Fiamengo, and thanks for joining us. This is Regarding Men, where we hold men in high regard. And I'm joined, as always, by the man of courage, Paul Elam, and the man of integrity, Tom Golden. and so today we're talking about a startling news story that we read about earlier in the week. It's about a young man or a boy, depending on how one regards him, a 16-year-old who, when he was in a juvenile detention center, was treated for something called oppositional defiant disorder, which I admit I'd never heard of before. We'll talk a little bit about the diagnosis. Oppositional defiant disorder. Apparently, he was also diagnosed with higher than normal testosterone levels, and the doctor who treated him decided that he should be given estrogen, a course of estrogen. The boy claims that he was not told what he was being treated with, and he was never given an option whether to accept the treatment or not. The parents, who are now suing, claim that they were never consulted, they were never given a diagnosis or given options for treatment. And this boy developed breasts that he is going to require an operation for, and a lot of other problems as a result, mood changes and headaches and various things. Obviously, it's a very serious thing to have surgery for the breast development that he experienced. And so his parents are suing the doctor, whose name I think was Tommy Wang. Is that right? No, Danny Wong. Oh my goodness, I'm getting that wrong. Oh, Danny Wong. Yeah, it was the
12-year-old in me is snickering.
Yeah, I know. I guess that was a Freudian slip, right? Anyway, sorry about that. So the doctor is being sued, and also I think the director of the juvenile detention center is also being sued. And this is one of the most, I'd say, bizarre and deeply disturbing stories that I've seen in a long time. I mean, we've read for years and years about the over prescribing of medications and the over diagnosing of boys starting as young as 6 years old, and going all the way up into early manhood with various types of disorders. We've all heard about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and all the Ritalin and various related medications that have been prescribed for that. At one point, I think it was estimated that 20% of boys in school had been diagnosed with ADHD and prescribed various types of medications. So that's been a concern for some time, but I've never heard of somebody being given estrogen for something called oppositional defiant disorder. So what is going on? I come to this story from a position of ignorance. I don't know anything about these types of disorders. I did, of course, read up on ODD. It suggested that the various what are they called? The features of the disorder would have to manifest frequently and severely for at least 6 months. I don't know how this doctor, how long he observed the boy. I don't even know what high testosterone is, how it would be determined. But to treat it with estrogen, that's clearly in the article I read. A medical doctor at UCLA was quoted as saying that this is not in any conceivable stretch of the imagination an appropriate treatment for ODD. So, I mean, what was in this doctor's mind? And what are we to make of this decision that he made?
There's the question, what was in his mind? And just sort of looking at this from the outside and adding two and two. First, I want to say Mangala would be proud like this, of this type of medicinal engineering
Yep.
of human beings. Some might think that's going over the line in comparison, in invoking Godwin's law. I don't buy it. I think it is comparable to some of the stuff that went on in Nazi Germany. But what I figure out of this is that we have a doctor that, for whatever reason, idiotically assumed that maybe imparting some feminine characteristics to one of the articles pointed out that he had a slightly elevated testosterone count, whatever that means.
I'd love to know what that means exactly. And I mean, I've never even I've heard of problems with low testosterone, but
absolutely,
you know, yeah.
Well,
and why you would
think that too much testosterone is just like a Hollywood myth. It's just something that the left made up a long time ago. Alan Alda used to talk about testosterone poisoning, which is never a thing. It never existed. There's no such thing whatsoever.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, if men are deficient in testosterone, it affects them very negatively in life. But there's no such thing as an overabundance of this that has to be chemically corrected that I've ever heard about. Maybe Tom would know more than that. But it just appears to me that we got an ideologue that thought, okay, well, I'll just tinker with this kid's chemistry and see if it doesn't settle him down any. And there's more to this I want to get to later, because I want to get both of you guys more in on this. But there's some other stuff about this that I find very disturbing too.
Yeah, the whole thing's a mess. And, you know, I worked in children's clinics for quite a while when I first started out, maybe 2 or 3 years. And the one diagnosis you did not want to get was oppositional disorder. I mean, it's like, this is a diagnosis that they give people who are completely out of control. I mean, completely out of control. There's no talking to them. There's no nothing. They're out of control. And this leaves therapists and the whole mental health society as being helpless. I mean, there's nothing you can do. There's very little you can do. So these folks are usually very, very frustrating for the clinic. You know, they're also, of course, frustrating for the family. I mean, they're just literally out of control. And so I can see how this doctor was trying to think of extreme means to, quote, experiment to see if maybe he could slow this down a little bit. I mean, but using estrogen is just not a good idea, particularly, I think they said it was 2 milligrams a day. And I looked at the dosages, and 2 milligrams a day is the top amount you give, not an average dose. It's like, and they gave him 3 injections to begin with. So it's like, yeah, this is sort of experimentation. They did not tell him what was going on. He refused it to begin with. Like you said, Janice, he refused it. They never told his parents. You know, oh, they're in some trouble.
There's some deep stuff going on here. There's somebody better get ready to write checks.
But the thing that really gets me the most is that this whole underlying piece of this is that the assumption of our mental health culture today is there's something wrong with boys. For sure. There's something wrong with boys, and they can be fixed if they become more like girls. And so give him estrogen. Maybe he'll be more like a girl. It's like, are you kidding me? I mean, it's just, this is the literal interpretation of this figurative crap that I heard in Division 51. I mean, the Division 51 psychologists, this is the premier APA group on boys and men. They literally, one of the guys put up there that we would only progress as a culture when men could become more like women. And no one disagreed with him. It's like that was the general assumption. This was what, 10 years ago, 10 years ago. So it's only gotten worse since then.
Yeah.
But I mean, to me, it's really a sad day, because this is the literal interpretation of that kind of idea that, oh, we'll just give him estrogen. Maybe he'll become more like a little girl.
Well, it's like, it's the, yeah, exactly as you say, Tom, it's the literalization of what we've been talking about, what
Yes.
our supposed thought leaders and medical experts and you
Yes.
know, opinion makers have been saying for the last 20 years in metaphorical terms, at least. And it's like, for one thing, you know, you couldn't have a clearer illustration of the notion that testosterone is, well, it's the idea of toxic masculinity, which I guess in a way replaced the notion of testosterone poisoning, which for a while was a kind of, it was in common parlance, and it meant basically male chauvinism, you know, the traits of men that feminist opinion makers have determined are damaging to society and to the men themselves. So I guess aggression in particular, competitiveness, you know, those kinds of things, a tendency to violence, etc. But I wanted to ask you, Tom, because like, as I don't understand these issues very well, but my limited understanding is that testosterone, the presence of testosterone, does not cause aggression, that's a myth, and that actually it might be the other way around to a certain extent, that if you are a fighter or something, that your testosterone levels would increase if you are engaged in certain kinds of aggressive sports or that sort of thing, that testosterone can then go up, and if you're engaged in a lot of physically taxing work and that sort of thing, but that it doesn't really work the other way around, or at least that there's no clear one-on-one correlation. So it seems like this doctor's idea that this guy was acting out, that he was aggressive, one is assuming, we don't even know why he was in the juvenile detention center in the first place. He obviously done something criminal, but we have no idea what. I guess he might have assaulted somebody. So he's been acting, and ODD is supposed to be characterized by irritability, by being argumentative, by talking back, by, you know, being hostile to, especially I guess figures in authority, but sort of a general hostility, bad mood, that kind of thing. But is there any, do you know, Tom, is there any indication that high testosterone is linked to this disorder?
I think that you hit it on the head, Janice, and that is that testosterone can increase with aggression. And what they used to think with the Alan Alda ideas that testosterone causes aggression, and that's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they know now that actually what happens is the aggression raises the testosterone, you know, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and of course, now we also know that testosterone is really about striving for status.
Mm-hmm.
Striving for status. It's not about aggression. And no, the young fellow, testosterone, I don't think was a major impact on what was going on with him. There's obviously other things going on, and insolubles. I mean, I'm sure they were really insoluble. Your description of the disorder, you can multiply that by about 10 in real life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are people who are just, you know, very, very difficult. Well, they will not cooperate at all with anyone, police, whatever. I mean, it's like, oh, so this is a therapist's nightmare. What do I do? It's going to make me look worse, you know? And so they're doing crap.
There's something else, another dimension to this too, that I'd like to explore as somebody, I worked several years on adolescent units in psychiatric hospitals and with those families. One thing I can tell you, you can go to almost any adolescent psychiatric unit and go through the charts there, and you're going to see one right after another. Conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder.
Right.
Something along these lines is what they admit people on and start medicating them. I mean, we're rightfully, I think, outraged that estrogen was used on this particular kid. It had devastating consequences for him. The father said he's not the same, that he hides in his room all day and won't come out into the world, and that he was never like that beforehand. But there are profound changes that boys in particular go through. A lot of these patients I'm referring to were boys. And a lot of times oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder is really, I got an alcoholic father disorder.
Yeah.
I've got an abusive mother disorder, and I'm acting out this in the family, and the family says, oh no, we're not putting up with this crap. We're going to stick you in some place. And I've literally had people come in, the father stinking of gin, saying, I found a joint in his bedroom. Take him for the next month. You know, we got good insurance. There's a ton of this stuff happening. And I guarantee you, this facility this boy was in was no exception.
Right.
This goes on across the United States all the time. Young boys get labeled with psychiatric diagnosis, get doped up with things like Ritalin, which we're finding has very severe long-term impact and implications for their lives. And instead of just confronting the parents in some good family therapy and really getting things sorted out, in order to make money, insurance companies and hospitals and that whole system ally with sick parents, and will treat the kid as the identified problem. When
they align with pharmaceuticals.
Yes, and pharmaceutical companies love it. The hospitals love it. Practitioners love it. It's a great racket. And we're just seeing I just want to remind everybody, we're seeing a really unusual crazy slice of crazy in this society with this, but this is a huge problem going on thousands and thousands of boys and very young men throughout this culture all the time. And it's a pet peeve of mine, but this is where it ends up when you can just rationalize any kind of treatment. Oh yes, he told his father no, here's a Ritalin, you know, go sit in the corner and don't bother us. And then you get the staffs of these places when they encounter opposition from a young patient, not knowing anything about their family history really, or what's going on, it gets their aggressiveness up. And I know, Tom, you're both nodding your heads. I know Tom has seen this firsthand, just like I have.
Yes. Yeah, and it's a tough spot for the therapist. I mean, I'm not saying they're, you know, horrible people or anything, because it's a tough spot with these folks who are so oppositional that they won't follow any direction at all. What are you going to do? But what you're not going to do is give them daggone estrogen.
Well, yeah. I mean, what, like, I don't know anything about estrogen really, except that it is not primarily something that, you know, is given to men. As far as I understand, its only uses really are for women. And I think it's usually given, I don't know if it's given for help with reproduction, but it's definitely given at menopause,
right?
To stabilize hormonal levels and that. I don't even know. I know it's given to transgender women, right, if a man is transitioning to a woman. So it's clearly, and it's associated with secondary sex characteristics.
Yes.
So what might have been in this guy's, aside from the notion that being more feminine, like, I don't even think, is there any evidence that estrogen calms people down? I thought it created maybe even the opposite, emotional volatility.
There's a PMS defense. It's a lot more successful in the UK than it is in the United States, but women have literally been pardoned from crimes because of PMS.
But is PMS caused by a drop in estrogen or a rise in estrogen? I don't even know that.
I have to admit, I have no idea.
I should have looked that up, because I'm not sure. I know that when women get it after menopause, sometimes it's because they're having trouble sleeping, they're irritable and that kind of thing. And so maybe in that case, leveling out the estrogen and supplementing it does actually lead to calming. But to think that it would do that in a young guy, I mean, that just seems bizarre. And
yes.
And I don't know. I mean,
this is particularly interesting to me, because I've been looking as close as I can at what does testosterone do? What happens in young men when they get this rise in testosterone? It's fascinating to look at. But I'll tell you what, I've been trying to find out for a couple of years now, what happens in young women when they get this rise in estrogen? What are the psychological impacts of that? And I haven't found much. It's really interesting that there's very little out there. There's a lot more on testosterone and what it does emotionally than the estrogen. And I'm real curious to hear what it does. You know, one of the other uses they had for estrogen traditionally, and this was controversial, was that they used to, girls who were too tall, who shot up in height, you know, in order to try and keep them from shooting up more in height, they'd give them estrogen. Is that interesting?
Yeah.
But, you know, I think that was a long time ago.
That sounds about as scientific as Dr. Wong.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, eh? It's pretty bad. But they would use it with girls, not with boys.
Yeah.
You know, of course, you want boys to be taller, I guess, but what the hell?
Yeah, I mean, if really the guy believed that an excess of testosterone was causing or in some way related to the bad behavior, why you would then think that giving estrogen is going to balance that out or something?
No, that's just it. I mean, there
crazy.
are testosterone blockers, I think. I think there's things you can take that will block testosterone, not estrogen.
Yeah.
You know?
It's really bizarre. Like I don't know. I mean, I find it's like a literalization of the bizarre pro-female, anti-male messaging that's all across our culture. And yet you would not expect, you know, even given the saturation of feminist and gynocentric sentiments everywhere in the culture, you would not expect that a medical doctor would, you know, be prescribing such a thing and would think that that would actually work. And you have to wonder, like, how many young guys has he done this to?
And
is this really,
you
know, wow, like, what are the chances that he only did it to this particular guy? I mean, it seems, almost zero. So who knows how many boys and young men who, you know, acting out in these extremely negative ways in a juvenile detention center, which I would think would be like maybe 30 to 40% or more of every guy who's in there, who's coming from a potentially abusive home or who's had experienced some kind of abuse or who's incredibly suspicious of authority figures telling him what to do, or is just having a generally lousy time in his life and is acting out. So how many guys had this done to them? I mean, it's creepy. And is this something that's being done at juvenile detention centers all across North America? Was this really just this one doctor's weird, was he just, you know, seeing what would happen? I mean, experimenting on people, or is this a new therapy that we haven't heard anything about, that a few doctors have been trying? I mean, wow, it's
and apparently they're going to find out in deposition. They're going to go after those questions about how many other people have been given estrogen, how many boys, and boy, I'm looking forward to hearing the answer to that.
Yeah.
You know, if this is a general trend, that's crazy.
And what happens, you know, to a young man who has a high dosage course of estrogen? I mean, what are the long-term effects going to be? Is this young fellow going to have trouble having children if he wants to? Like, is this going to screw him up in a profound and potentially permanent way?
It already has.
I mean, he's got breasts. He's going to have to undergo surgery.
And he went through the trauma of the other boys in the facility when he started evidencing breasts.
Can imagine.
They started bullying him.
Teasing him. Yeah.
He's been through a horrible psychological tragedy over this that we could only begin to imagine the damage to his psyche over this long term. And, you know, at least one thing, I mean, I was sort of surprised. I was very surprised along with you, Janice, that something like this could either happen. But when you think about it, when you think about the narrative about men and women that's so pervasive in this culture, it's not that shocking that something like this would emerge. As a matter of fact, it wouldn't even be that shocking to me to find out that feminists have a fundraiser for this quack that was tinkering with the boys' endocrine system because he thought it would do, you know, good things to make him more feminine. I wouldn't be surprised at anything anymore.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, when we were interviewing Mallory Millett, and I was rereading the chapter on theory of sexual politics in Kate Millett's book, she actually cites John, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Money Mooney, you know, was it Money?
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, she cites him as her primary authority in alleging that gender is entirely a social construct. She claims that all the best doctors, all the most advanced medical knowledge now realizes and accepts that gender is social entirely. It's fluid, it's, you know, it's determined by culture, etc. And she cites him. And, you know, we all know what happened there, that determined to prove his theories that that was the case. He advised the parents of, I think his name was Brent Reimer originally, who had a botched circumcision and had lost a good part of his penis. He advised them to turn his parents advised them to turn their little boy into a girl. And, you know, this was a great twin study because David was one of twins. And you know, Dr. Money was just he wrote papers about it. It was used to make the case that here was a perfect example of a boy raised as a girl who accepted his femininity, played with little dolls while his twin brother was playing with trucks. I mean, it's a horrifying story, and the guy sounds completely weird to me. Like, he had the two little boys acting out sexual roles together while they were visiting him in his office, and just all sorts of strange things. And of course, both boys ended up killing themselves in the end. One through an overdose of drugs, and the boy who had been Brent, who'd become the little girl, and who then became David, eventually shot himself. And so, you know, and this sort of seems, it has the same kind of whiff of it, that, you know, somebody following through a quacky theory and just seeing whether maybe he can make it true on these young guys who are fairly expendable and, you know, are already in trouble and not particularly well looked after in most cases.
Which is pretty much all boys.
Yeah.
It'll be fascinating to see if there is outrage about this, or if people are just going to snooze through it. You know?
Yeah.
I hope
I'm
this
betting
outrage.
on the latter.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're probably right.
Yeah. I mean, so far I haven't really seen it that particularly widely reported, or, you know, it hasn't been front page.
Yeah, this story's
news.
been out for several days, and it doesn't look to have caught any real traction out there with the media, so I wouldn't expect them to give a damn. We've got a few comments here. One individual says, I would think giving estrogen would trick the body to create more testosterone to balance, and it might.
Yeah.
I wish I knew more about the endocrine system, but I do know that there is a balancing act that goes on between testosterone and estrogen in human males, with of course, a great balance going to testosterone. Another one says, why would they think estrogen would calm him down? It's not the chill hormone. Well, unfortunately, the three of us have not been able to speculate our way into what was going on in this fool's mind. I can't tell. Could it be that the APA guidelines we talked about last year are somehow would conclude that estrogen is a solution to oppositional defiant disorder? Well, if you follow their thinking rationally, I would say, yeah, there's a chance of that. And that was my best guess about Dr. Wong's decision to medically abuse these patients of his with the wrong drug.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's like something out of you know, Frankenstein. It's really, I find it the most horrifying story I've seen in a long time.
It is. Somebody else says, are we too quick to diagnose disorders for male teenage behavior?
Yes.
And we're very quick to misdiagnose male teenage behavior. Boys are rambunctious. They're supposed to be. They're rough and tumble. They're supposed to be. They don't want to sit around and talk about their feelings. That's how they're supposed to be. And of course, everything in the modern psychological establishment is opposed to that. Now think about the implications of that. Everything that boys are in their natural state is ideologically opposed by the mental health establishment. Let that add up in your mind for a few minutes of what that ends up meaning. And
terrifying.
Then
women good,
ask ourselves where the wrong came from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I read somewhere that a study was done that showed that 30% more boys who were diagnosed with ADHD were born in December, which they realized meant that these boys were quite a bit younger than their grade cohort. And so that they were simply a little bit, naturally behind the average of the grade cohort in being able to adjust to what they were being asked to do. And so a lot of what was being diagnosed as a disorder was just them being who they were at their age.
Immature.
And it's scary to think that millions of boys across North America are being given all sorts of drugs that have permanent negative impacts because they're being misdiagnosed.
Also, look at what happens in so many, we have a plague, unfortunately, of single mothering in this culture.
Yeah.
And you have women who have divorced their husbands, gotten rid of the father. Mm-hmm. The child starts acting out. Duh. Yeah. The child starts acting out. Oh, well, he's a behavioral problem now.
Yeah.
School said he's acting up in class. We need to do something with him. They'll get him connected to a medical consult, though, where he will be prescribed Ritalin, whether he needs it or not.
Yeah.
And then 25 years later, he can develop liver cancer from the Ritalin and die from that. This is what we do. That's why I said that, the estrogen case here is a particularly bizarre one. It's no more bizarre than we do every day. What we're doing to boys is unconscionable.
Yes. Yeah, the whole Ritalin story is a fascinating one too, because they knew that Ritalin was a dangerous drug, but 2 doctors basically pushed it and said, "Oh, this is safe, parents. This is safe. You can take this. You can take this." And later they were taken to court for it, and I think they lost. But they pushed this in order to push the pharmaceuticals, and they were wrong. They shouldn't have been pushing that crap. What boys need is they need to work out. They need to go run another lap or 2.
Yeah.
That's what would help me when I was, in middle school. The coach would say, "Run 2 laps, Golan." I'd run 2 laps. I would damn well feel better. I thought, what a jackass he is for doing that, but I would feel better. And guys need that. They need that movement, but they're told to sit still, don't move. And if you move, that's a problem. Be like the girls. Yeah. They can sit still and do nothing.
Yes, get in your little groups and discuss the questions that your teacher has given you, just in a very feminine kind of way.
You 15 minutes at recess to run around and play. Yeah. After that, you are to stop.
Yeah. No, and now they don't have recess, Paul.
Oh, yeah.
Cut it out.
They did. They cut
it out. Too masculine. Cut out dodgeball, for crying out loud. Yeah. You can't be hit by a ball. That might hurt someone. Oh, God.
No. Anyway, it'll be interesting to follow this story for sure. And I hope that it will be, that we'll find out more about the case, and not it won't take too long for us to find out more.
I'll be reading those depositions, because I really want to hear what this did to this young man. I want to know psychologically what happened to him during this whole time when he was taking that stuff, because that's a critical piece of information for us to know.
Yeah, and I'd really like to know what the doctor thought he was doing.
Yeah.
Well, the doctor, apparently, from everything I read, the doctor could not be reached for comment.
Yeah, that's what I saw too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, he was running an experiment, on an unwilling subject.
Yeah.
Or it may be something, this may be a longitudinal study, Tom. He might have been doing it for years.
That's true,
exactly.
too.
Exactly.
That's true,
too. I want to make sure we get in this one other comment, at least here, before we close, from Jay Deep. He says, I once met a lady who was crying as she told me she was trying to challenge the school's decision to reevaluate their decision that unless she gets her son on medication, he will likely lose admission right here in Canada.
Not surprised. Wow.
This is a complex of the pharmaceutical industry, the departments of education in our respective nations, teachers unions, all school counselors, all involved in this. And our grade schools and middle schools have become factories where we start pointing anybody that is a little bit of extra bother toward a pill that will keep them quiet. It really disturbs me.
Yeah, and there's one more comment, Paul. Can you please discuss if there are any policy changes that can create effective change and reverse this trend of extensive use of medication to command obedience? Man, I wish I knew the answer to that.
Yeah.
Well, it would start, in my opinion, I hate to say this, but it'll start, you've got parents out there, not just single mothers, but them included, but you've got parents out there that'll spend 20 minutes on Facebook trying to figure out, what kind of songbird they are on a quiz, but won't spend 5 minutes researching the long-term effects of Ritalin.
Yeah.
The parents also, the kid's a little bit about to handle, give him a pill, and if it settles down, they're happy with that.
And get his father there, I mean, to me, that's the policy we need to really work on, is getting fathers back in the home.
In that case, they're really screwed.
Who's really screwed?
Anybody.
Boys?
We're not a society moving toward getting fathers back in the home. We're in
no kidding. But as far as policy, that would be something that could help.
Yeah.
That would help.
Yes, it would. It would solve the problem.
Yep.
Largely.
Crack down.
But as we always say, we always end on a happy note around here.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Happy note, a happy Ghanacentric note. Because that's the other piece of this, is that Ghanacentrism is pushing all this stuff. It's pushing everything. It's the current that sort of pushes things through. And people are completely unaware of Ghanacentrism. And that's the other thing you can do as far as policy goes, is to start helping people understand that there's this Ghanacentric bias that our culture has that pushes. Even
to the extent of the fact that most primary school teachers, the vast majority, are female.
Right. And they are definitely gynocentric.
Yeah, they don't want to deal with
They love the girls
these
and they're
disruptive
tired of the
boys in general.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, not all of them, of course, but they're not really equipped to. And the boys would prefer male teachers, I'm sure.
Yes.
Whether
Even
consciously or not.
Male teachers.
Many of the girls would too. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, on that happy note.
On that happy note, someone wants to know who wins the PUTA. I'm assuming that we're just going to hand it to the good doctor.
I think so.
Yeah,
Tommy Wong.
Dr. Wong. And remember, Dr. Wong is only an R away from being wrong.
Yeah. That should have been my mnemonic. I think he gets the PUTA.
He gets the PUTA. Thank you for asking the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me thank everybody for showing up. Appreciate your participation in this discussion. We'll be back next Thursday with another one. We've got lots of big announcements coming up regarding men in the very near future. And also feel free, like us here on Facebook, go visit the website, sign up for the newsletter.
Spread the word.
Until then, we always remember that men
are
good. That was close.
That was close enough. I mean, one of these days we'll learn how to coordinate that. You'd think 3 adults with 3 words.
Could do it. Yeah, you think so.
Wouldn't be fun that way. Let's not coordinate it. I like it this way.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Much more fun. Screw it up.
You guys take care. We'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
As are you. Y'all take care.